Hi, it's Darren from SimNation. Going to do a quick recap video for WWPF. We are at the end of the season. Championship game has run, so I want to catch you up really quickly, and I do mean really quickly, on what has happened. So the last time we talked, we were entering into the playoffs. So I have that screen up in front of me. Philadelphia snuck into the playoffs and were on a really big hot streak, and then Templar just said no and slammed the door shut on them with a 62-13 win. I think Templar was able to key in on Philadelphia's rushing attack and just completely shut it down. And then, of course, Martin is an elite quarterback. He has Apple, who's probably one of the most elite wide receivers out there, and they just absolutely obliterated Philadelphia to the tune of 62-13. Kind of a little rubbing salt in the wounds at the end with 27 points in the fourth quarter when you were already up 35-6. Good job, Templar. Philadelphia is a team to watch for next season. They got a good coach, and I think they're going to bounce back pretty good. The next game was Stewart at San Francisco versus DWK. This was kind of a toss-up. Stewart definitely not having the season he wanted to have. DWK having a really good season. And DWK is one of the first-year coaches in the league. So they've largely been doing it on the ground with Seton at Green Bay, but he switched it up and kind of caught Stewart a little bit with Sanders throwing the ball. Not a great game from Sanders, by the way, with the 2 picks against 1 interception, but Adcock had a very good game, and Stewart did a very good job of running the ball. But in the second half, it was really all Green Bay. They managed to tie it up, send it to overtime, and then, of course, kick the field goal and win it. Probably the shock of the season is right here. Uh, Peter is typically money when it comes to the postseason with Oakland. They started off strong, 20-10, it was actually 20-7 until the final play when Jacksonville scored on like a 108-yard kick return. That apparently changed the whole momentum of the game, and then suddenly Peter found himself on the receiving end of a 28-7 run in the second half, which allowed Jacksonville to upset Oakland. Giordano didn't have as good of a game. Makes you wonder what it might have been had Denham been playing or Reynold been playing, but we'll never know. Hats off to Starfinder. It's not often that someone beats Peter in the playoffs, and Starfinder joins a select few. Um, and it's a really good season. McCulloch had a good game, if I'm not mistaken, and he's the rookie quarterback out of Central Florida who has really had a really good season. Um, this game was an interesting one. It's Rick versus Shark. So Rick's a brand new coach. Shark, of course, is an established coach. Again, another overtime game. In this case, Shark made a game of it late to get it tied up. And then, of course, Rick managed to stop Shark and then march down the field and score, which allowed him to win it in overtime. So Willis, who's the quarterback for Indianapolis, had a really good game and definitely helped lead them to the win. Then we went to the division championships. Arizona, who is the CPU team that has been beating up on human coaches all year, took out Templar. Martin had a great game, but it wasn't enough to really influence the win. McDonald, who is Arizona's quarterback from Maryland, he's a dual threat, largely came in and managed to help them win along with Taft, and Arizona got the win in a very close one. Uh, the best team in the NFC all season long was Carolina. They would take on DWK. This one really wasn't close at all. Great job by Invisible Witness with calling this one out. He had the right game plan right from the beginning, which was a good balance of running and passing. So 370 yards from Zielinski, who has had a phenomenal season, was a little too much for DWK. The Cinderella story that was Jacksonville, led by Starfinder, ran into the immovable object that is DP in the New York Jets. He wasn't probably going to knock off Peter and DP in the same playoffs. If he had, he'd be a legend right then and there. Spriggs just played out of his mind with 7 touchdowns, throwing 2 touchdowns to Martin, of course. The Jets are just speed, pure and simple. It's really hard to defend against them. There's only been really 2 teams that beat them this year, Buffalo and Pittsburgh. The Buffalo was a fluke. Pittsburgh really wasn't. But the Cinderella slipper fell off and he couldn't find it, and the Jets move on. The other game was Rick at Indianapolis versus me at Pittsburgh. This one was going to be a slugfest between 2 teams that are kind of similar. Luna had a good game with 226 yards. Lackey, who is the exceptional Pittsburgh running back, had a really good game with 112 yards, and Pittsburgh moved on. When we got into the conference championship, so CPU versus Invisible Witness. Invisible Witness still not having it. Zelensky went out of his mind again, 21 to 28, 406 yards, 5 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. And the end result is Carolina moves on with a 38 to 13 win. The matchup that everybody was probably looking forward to, if it was either going to be the Jets versus Oakland or Steelers versus the Jets. The Steelers managed to take this one, largely behind a 24 to 10 run in the second half. With they're one of the few teams I think that have kept Spriggs under 50% completion, but he still did a lot of damage with 338 yards, 3 touchdowns. Uh, Lackey had a great game on the ground with 170 yards rushing, and then if you look at the box scores, Pittsburgh's touchdowns came from Phillips, who was 17 of 21 for 284 yards, 5 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. You think about that, right? It means he only had really 2 other incompletions other than the 2 picks that he threw. And I want to say that one of those picks, no, that didn't. Uh, so Phillips had a really great game, but he did throw those 2 interceptions. So that got us to the final, which Pittsburgh won, downing the Panthers 34 to 31. Panthers had a really good first half. It was tied up at 17. They made it 24 to 17 in the third before Pittsburgh came back in the fourth, largely behind their defense, which managed to finally start getting some stops. Zelensky still threw for over 350 yards, 3 touchdowns, but his completion percentage wasn't as high. Pittsburgh came out throwing, which probably shocked a lot of people, especially since Pittsburgh has been living and dying on the running game. Phillips, those 2 interceptions were early, so he literally threw an interception on each of the first 2 possessions by the Steelers. And then he settled down and really got to work. So Lackey didn't have a great game, but he wasn't getting as many carries as he normally gets because most of the time the Steelers were passing. Bohm had a really good game, as did Roush. Uh, and then on the defensive front, Scott Riley, who is one of the young Steelers cornerbacks, really shut down the second wide receiver 2 position and allowed the Steelers to have a really strong game. And then, of course, the Steelers got a lot of penetration on the end. As you can see here, Will, you have Pruitt, who is one of the outside linebackers. Weiss is one of the defensive ends. Maggie's a defensive end. They did manage to get some pressure on Zelensky, which helped them to win the title. So what's up next? Next up is awards, which will run tomorrow night. I think based on the recent voting, Spriggs is probably going to win Offensive MVP, which I think is accurate. He definitely deserves it. He had an amazing season this year, and I can't think of anyone that probably deserves it more than he does. So I'm just checking real quick to see who's got it so far. So for league MVP, I think Spriggs has like 3 votes versus 2 votes for James Johnson. Offensive MVP is going to probably be the same way. 3 versus, I'm sorry, Johnson is actually probably going to win the offensive MVP. With Spriggs right now second with 2. That'll be interesting. And then defensive MVP is looking more and more like I'm going to get to pick it because it's a tie between Nathaniel. I'm sorry, no, Robertson from Carolina leads right now. So, uh, and then the rookie of the year, I'm gonna let the CPU pick it. It's gonna be between Lackey, Terrell Bryant, George Enos. I am gonna throw Ronald McCulloch in there only because I think he deserves it. I personally really feel like Trent Anderson probably deserves to win the defensive rookie of the year. Yeah, Michael Perry had a good season. He was hurt for part of it. Lab had a really great season too, but I think you just can't discount what Anderson's done. Um, this one uphill will be a little tougher because it's the age-old argument is the guy who runs over 2,000 yards, one of the few people to do it, get it over a person who scored 12 touchdowns or 14 touchdowns. In my opinion, Enos may be higher than Bryant and then Lackey, and then you throw in Ronald McCulloch. After that runs, we'll have the Pro Bowl. So we run awards and Pro Bowl at the same time, which means the season will flip on Tuesday, and we'll be into a new season, which will start with coach hiring, and then of course move into free agency. Sometime around end of coach hiring and free agency, we'll see the new draft class. Frankie's working on that right now. There's some interesting dynamic to this class. So I've done a video on this before where this may be the class to get a quarterback because there are quite a few good quarterbacks coming out. But if you're looking for a running back, this is probably not the class for you. Um, so it'll be interesting to see how that pans out. And then, of course, after that, we'll finish up free agency and then move into the next season. This season will probably be the last, the season coming will be the last one on 2023 because by the time we finish that next season, uh, Pro Football 2024 should be out. Similar to SNCFL, once we finish this upcoming season, there's a strong chance the college football 2024 will be out, and we'll adopt that as soon as it comes out, as soon as our season ends. So great season for everyone. I do want to kind of say thank you to all the different coaches. We had quite a few new coaches join us. It definitely made for a really, really interesting season with some unexpected twists and turns. I mentioned Starfinder beating Peter. That's a definite twist. Pittsburgh, of course, had a 19-0 season. That's a big deal. I feel like Baltimore's going to have a really good season next year. Kevin is a good coach. He's one of the new coaches. Bio Eagles getting really close to turning it around. Rick had a great season with Indianapolis. He was a first year coach as well. Starfinder too. We have Bama at Tennessee, JP at Houston. So these two, I look for these two teams to improve. They both draft well, so I'm looking forward to that. DP, probably I think New York and Oakland are two teams to beat next year in the AFC. Pittsburgh should be up there because they're not losing a lot, but New York and Oakland, I'm pretty sure Peter's just going to bounce back. Great season from Shark. Soa had a decent season. And then Prince had a good season, just fell short. Althaben, who's one of our German coaches, had a really good first season as well. AFC is going to be pretty competitive next year. DWK with Green Bay, really good first season, made it to the playoffs. I'm hoping Pops is back for a time because when Pops is there, Detroit's a really good team, and that NFC North is very competitive. Rick will be back with Minnesota. I do expect Minnesota to have a better season next year. They just couldn't beat anybody in their division. That kind of hurt them. We talked about Invisible Witness. He's building a dynasty, though. I'm really excited about where he's going to take that. New Orleans is open, so is Tampa Bay. So if you want to take either of those two teams, New Orleans is a pretty solid squad. Templar, Philadelphia is going to give him a run for his money, but Templar may have a stranglehold on the East. I expect Udo to jump back as well, so it'll probably be a horse race between these threes. I think Cable's one season away from getting back into that race, but after losing almost every game last season, he did really good this season by winning 5, so kudos. If you're interested in a really good CPU team, Arizona and Seattle are two good teams, as is Los Angeles. Stewart should bounce back and probably win that division next season. So All in all, great work, everyone. Thank you for the great season. I'm going to end the recap hill. We will be flipping hill shortly, and if anyone wants to join, now is the perfect time. I'll put the link in the video and talk to you soon. Thanks.